My name's Eugene Worley, and along with my wife Glenda, we have spent nearly 50 years in ministry in Ethiopia, Norway, the UK, and in the US. I'd like in these podcasts to share with you some of our experiences from those years. Life and ministry in Ethiopia. The story of how God miraculously preserved an infant church in southern Ethiopia during the Italian occupation from 1935 to 1937 is told in the book Fire on the Mountain by Raymond J. Davis. In the foreword of the book, William Culberson wrote, "It is the story of God at work even when missionaries are removed. True, they were used of God to lay a foundation. They were used of God to pray. True, God raised up Spirit-anointed and dedicated leaders of the national church. But who can account for the revival fires that saw 48 converts become 10,000 in 5 years, and these years of occupation of their land?" This is the amazing story of the Sudan Interior Mission in southwest Ethiopia. Hosanna is a town in southeastern Ethiopia, became a leading center for Protestant Christianity in southern Ethiopia. It began in 1929 when 2 missionaries came to the area and preached the gospel. As early as 1949, the town sponsored a Bible conference with as many as 800 attending. Today, 65% of the population is Protestant. I share this as a backdrop to the trip we made to Hosanna. To say it was eventful is an understatement. I will simply describe the trip as I wrote in a June and July 2000 newsletter that I entitled 6 Flats and 1 Spare. It was April, and Pastor Berhanu Joseph invited Jim Singleton and me to travel with him to southern Ethiopia for a conference. Berhanu was the main speaker, but we would be speaking as well. The only 4-wheel drive vehicle we had was a Chevrolet Suburban that belonged to Jim. Unfortunately, the tires needed replacing. In spite of this, we traveled 8 hours on very bad roads before reaching our destination. About 1 hour from Hosanna, we had our first flat. We did have a spare and managed to drive into town where we could get it repaired. The church was located about 1 hour outside of Hosanna in the middle of the woods. We didn't get there until about 8 p.m., but everyone was waiting for us. The only light was a gas lantern, but the place was packed, and we had a wonderful service. We had services all day on Friday and also on Saturday. On Sunday, Jim and Berhanu went back into town, but they had 2 flats before they reached town. They were able to catch a ride with someone and get the tire repaired, catch another ride, and get back out to the truck. It rained really hard on Saturday night, but that didn't stop the people from coming to church. In fact, they walked in the rain and didn't think anything about having to walk home, in some cases many miles. We finished the conference Sunday morning and left after lunch, hoping to get back to Addis that night. We'd traveled about an hour and a half when we had our 3rd flat. The spare didn't look good at all, but we did make it to the next town, only to find out that they did not have any tires to fit the truck. We decided that it might be wise to stop for the night since we did not have a spare. We spent the night, but we were up by 6 a.m. and on our way. We had not gone more than 45 minutes when, bang, we had another flat. This time there was no spare, and Berhanu caught a ride with a truck and went into the next town, hoping they would have a tire the size that we needed. We sat there in that dry and desert-like area for about 5 hours. The tire Berhanu was able to get was threadbare, but we did manage to get into the next town, and then that tire went flat. In the end, Berhanu took a bus into Addis and bought a tire and brought it back the next day. We were so thankful for the new tire, but then the battery went dead. We left the truck there and rode back to Addis with Berhanu, who had driven his car back when he went into Addis. I took Jim back the next day to get his truck. In spite of all the breakdowns, the blessing was that the church in Hosanna asked Berhanu if his church in Addis would sponsor the construction of a new church in that area. Their church had been given property, but needed help in building it. This made the 6 flat tires and the 2 extra nights spent on the road worth it all. Life continued on in Addis with a teaching and preaching schedule. In addition to my college classes, I spoke on the weekend at local churches in Addis. I was asked to teach a series from the book of 1 Corinthians in one church, and this was followed with a series of lessons from the book of Ephesians. I also brought a 3-week series on marriage in another church. We finished our first year of college in June 2000 with a closing day program for the college. There were about 60 people present, coming from all the churches. The students gave a report for each of the classes taken that semester. The pastor from Calvary Baptist Church was the speaker, and the choir from Boley Bible Baptist Church presented special music. In order to maintain continuity for the college, we decided to do a Saturday class through the summer months. Glenda taught an English class, and I taught a homiletics class. Speaking of summer, June through September is the rainy season, which means it will rain every day. When the rains first began in June, you may have a week of rain at night, and it will be clear during the day. Then it may be a week of rain in the morning or afternoon, which makes it fairly predictable. However, by August, it seems that the rains are coming all the time, and it is really messy. May was typically the month for weddings. The weather was usually favorable, though we did attend one wedding in May when on that particular day it fell a flood. The church had a tin roof, and you could hardly hear anything that was said. The poor bride and groom were beautifully dressed, but they had to run in pouring rain to get to their car when they left. Before the rain started in June, the water levels were getting low, which affected the availability of electricity since they used hydroelectric power. They started rationing electricity every 3 days. The power was off from 7 a.m. until in some cases 10 p.m. at night. We used a lot of candles during that time. One evening, I came home from class, and Glenda was sitting on the couch reading with a flashlight laying on her shoulder. I thought I would adjust it for her, but that was a mistake. She had it just where she wanted it. Preparing meals was a challenge for Glenda, but we were fortunate that our cooking stove was both electric and gas. So when the power was off, we used gas. On the other hand, there was a shortage of bottled gas, so we had to be careful then. I described in my last letter for the year 2000 the problems that we had had with both the internet and our telephone service. I said, "We are grateful that we have internet service, but our telephone service is very poor, which creates problems for our internet service. We can only get online in the early morning and in the evening." Such was the challenge of living and serving the Lord in Ethiopia. This is podcast number 22. We look forward in our next podcast with more stories of life and ministry in Ethiopia.